Namaskar and welcome to India First. I'm Priyanka Agarwal Chaudhary. General Qamar Javed Bajwa has now been chosen as Pakistan's next Chief of Army Staff by Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. It's a critical position for the country where the Pakistani military has an overwhelming role not just in security policy but in shaping domestic policy and relations with neighbouring countries. Now, with regime change happening in Pakistan's army headquarters, will an opportunity arise for a diplomatic initiative between India and Pakistan? That's our point of discussion today, and joining us are two very special guests. On my left, we have with us Ambassador G. Parthasarthy, who's been the former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. And on his left, we have Mr. Sushant, who's a strategic expert and senior fellow at the Vivekanand International Foundation. Thank you both for joining us here on India First. Master Parthasarthy, I'm going to start with you first. Looking at India-Pak relations, looking at the ceasefire violations that we're seeing on the LOC from across the border, the new low that the relations have hit. So the talking point really being, with a change of guard at Pakistan, in Pakistan's army, is this going to be an initiative for diplomatic relations to begin again, or a change in those relations?
Well, let me put it this way: you should not look at Pakistan army in terms of an individual. It's an institution. It's an institution where its officers are taught from the day they enter the National Academy in Abbottabad, where Osama bin Laden was found. They're incidentally trained in Abbottabad. They are taught one thing: to hate India. And in fact, they're very clear that they are the sort of followers of and the successors of the Mughal Empire, that they've been deprived of what they require, what was theirs, and therefore the status quo of an India so much stronger than Pakistan is unacceptable. It is what I call as a revanchist army. It did not change after Bangladesh, which was a humiliating defeat. In fact, it was after Bangladesh, largely during the time of Zia-ul-Haq, that they took us to a strategy of bleeding India with 1,000 cuts. Meaning we don't have to fight a war with India, but we will work inside India, whether it's Jammu and Kashmir or Punjab. Even the latest incident in Punjab has links across the border of the attack on the jail. So I think this institutional change will not occur.
Okay.
What the new army chief can do is be guided by political considerations. His predecessor, Rahil Sharif, was guided by considerations of personal vendetta, because his uncle and his brother were killed in conflicts with us. So whether that happens, I think General Bikram Singh has put it very well. He will be guided by a larger institutional consideration. Okay. He'll have to see whether getting into too much of a conflict with India will affect the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which the military is very keen on. So we still have time. You can't assess him before June next year.
So it's going to be a wait and watch situation?
It'll be wait and watch. In the meantime, I cannot see him really, though he is known to be averse to these jihadi organizations. Which jihadi organizations is he averse to? Is he averse to Tehreek-e-Taliban, averse to the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, which are fighting the Pakistan army? Or is he averse to everybody, including Lashkar-e-Taiba? I doubt very much if it's the latter.
Okay, so Mr. Sareen, looking at the name that came up, do you think it was surprising? And taking forward what Ambassador Parthasarthy is talking about, this wait and watch situation is what India is going to be adopting with this name coming off of General Bajwa?
Yeah, I don't think we have a choice but to do something like that. And even if we see the new army chief trying to tamper down the kind of tension there is along the LOC, it might just be a tactical adjustment on the Pakistani side for the reasons which Ambassador Parthasarthy has just recounted, because in the strategic orientation of the Pakistan army, the mindset of the Pakistan army is inveterately hostile to India. So to expect that one guy is going to come and going to change everything, that's not going to happen.
Of course.
We might see some kind of a tactical pause on the Pakistani side, But I think it's very important for us to keep our powder dry. The second thing is that the reason why this person has been chosen, there were certain political reasons. For example, he did play a bit of a role in dissuading the former chief Raheel Sharif from taking any kind of action when Nawaz Sharif was under a lot of pressure in 2014. So he has had some role in doing that. He is supposed to be a guy who's opposed to the jihadi organizations, but look, he is not the first one. From Musharraf down, every single chief in Pakistan has said that the internal threat is greater than the external threat from India, and yet that has not prevented them, or that has not stopped them from pandering to, supporting, spawning these terrorist organizations which direct their guns against India. So will he do something different this time? The third thing is that while he is keen on supporting the civilian government, if he actually wants to clean up the terrorist nests inside Pakistan, will he then step on civilian toes? We don't know how that will play out. And finally, this whole thing about him being an expert on the line of control, having served out there both in the northern areas as well as as the Corps Commander Rawalpindi, he is in charge of the LOC. That could be one of the things which he probably understands, that look, if I was to provoke India, then the retribution is now very swift from this government. This has not been happening in the past, and the kind of retribution which is being extracted, I think it's something which will give the Pakistanis a second thought. But one final point, if the Pakistanis think that by keeping the line of control quiet, they can still push in terrorists, I think then they will have another thought coming their way very soon. Because I think if their calculations are based on the old India, which was okay with terrorism happening, and yet keeping some kind of a peace and quiet, tranquility along the line of control, I think that's gone out of the window.
True, and the government has really shown that even with the surgical strike that took place and the kind of answer that we've given to Pakistan, even along the LOC, when these ceasefire violations have been happening. But if we talk more about General Bajwa and the things that have been written about him, I was going through a lot of media reports in 2014 when he talked about what you were saying earlier, that earlier generals also talking about that threats are from militants, particularly not from India, but the kind of criticism that he's got from hardliners as well. What will that really shape when it comes to this whole relation with the neighbors, and not just with India, with other neighbors as well? How will that affect the strategic ties, so to say?
You see, everybody, including even Musharraf, was very selective on hitting the so-called hardliners. They will not touch the... Musharraf clamped down on the Jaish-e-Mohammed because members of the Jaish-e-Mohammed tried to assassinate him in 2014. 2004, sorry. These people will keep these assets. They may keep them at a lower key. But I go along with Sushant. I think the message very clearly, which has gone, is it's just not enough if you say, I'm sitting where I am, but I'll send the jihadis across. I think the fact of the matter is the message now is loud and clear after the surgical strike, that we will hit your camps even if you are not doing anything, because the camps, this is what we did the last time. We didn't strike at Pakistan Army posts. We hit at staging points, what they are called as staging points for infiltration. That's what we hit. So I think as long as we hold out that threat, or hold out not just the threat, hold out that possibility and probability, the Pakistanis are not going to turn. But as I said, the snows are melting, are coming in the Himalayas. Everybody gets into their houses. Infiltration is more difficult, but we have to keep our things ready. I just am worried about what has happened in Punjab, because I know for a fact that many of these so-called Khalistanis, they are mostly living in the Gurudwaras in Pakistan. Some in Dera Sahib, some in Nankana Sahib, but they are there. So using terrorism as an instrument of state policy is not likely to change. I think the more crucial thing is they use terrorism not only on our border but the border with Afghanistan. Their greater dilemma is going to be that.
Okay.
Because the support from for the Taliban is unrestrained, and the Afghan army is getting better equipped, and you have a certain Mr. Donald Trump who's said to be very unpredictable.
True. So I was going to come to that. I mean, US talking about welcoming this whole announcement as well. But then if we talk about the civil-military relations in Pakistan, do you think we could be seeing a little bit of a difference there? And then what does it mean for the strategic ties with India, if that happens?
Look, I think we would be being very presumptuous if we think that with a new guy in, as the army chief, the old civil-military dynamic is going to undergo a massive transformation. I think what Raheel Sharif has done is something quite smart. It's been done in the past as well, which is that the army rules without ruling. It calls the shots, it forces the government to give in to whatever its demands are, whatever its desires are. So it's led the government down that road. The government does not have any room for maneuver on relations with India, Afghanistan. They don't call the shots on that anyways. I don't know how much the new chief will actually play along or give the civilians that leeway to forge a new policy of their own. The second thing is that there is a certain slur. You mentioned about the hardliners earlier. There is a certain slur on on General Bajwa, although he's supposed to be a very competent professional and all of that. He had to rise to the rank he had risen. But there are these insinuations that his family belongs to the Ahmadi sect and all of that, who are non-Muslims. So and that was a canard which was spread against him by his predecessor and some of the people in the army itself, because they wanted somebody else, they were plugging for somebody else. Now, number one, so the Pakistan army is a bit of a snake pit. How does the general maneuver within the Pakistan army, and his space for maneuver would be rather limited for some months, because a lot of the people who would be manning most of the top positions right now, whether as corps commanders or as principal staff officers, would be more or less his contemporaries, maybe a bad junior or something like that. But in about 3 to 6 months' time, he'll be in a better position to place his own people.
Okay.
And that is the time when he actually will have his feet firmly planted on the ground. By that time also, that honeymoon period between the new army chief and the civilian government would probably be coming to an end. So, we would get a better idea of how exactly the new dynamic is going to work in about 3 to 6 months' time, not immediately.
All right, so we're going to come back to this discussion in just a bit. Right now, we're going to take a quick break here on India Affairs. We'll continue this discussion on the other side. Stay with us.
क्या बात है राशिद? फर्स्ट डिवीजन में पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन करने के बाद भी तुम उदास हो? लेकिन सर वो सोच रहे होगे कि खर्चा कहाँ से आएगा? हाँ, चिंता मत करो, क्योंकि अब तुम्हारे साथ है मौलाना आजाद नेशनल फेलोशिप।
फेलोशिप हमारे लिए सर?
हाँ, तुम्हारे लिए और अल्पसंख्यक समुदाय के उन स्टूडेंट्स के लिए जिनकी सालाना पारिवारिक आय 2.5 लाख रुपए से कम है और जिन्होंने किसी भी सरकारी विश्वविद्यालय से जूनियर रिसर्च फेलोशिप या एमफिल के लिए आवेदन दिया है।
मदद हमारी, मंजिल आपकी।
नहीं यार, अब ये रैगिंग बिल्कुल बर्दाश्त नहीं हो रही है, कंप्लेन तो करनी पड़ेगी।
तू पागल हो गई है क्या? सीनियर से पंगा लेगी तो तेरा और बुरा हाल करेंगे।
नो यार, हेल्पलाइन नंबर है, आई एम श्योर दे विल हेल्प।
हेल्पलाइन नंबर से कभी किसी को हेल्प नहीं मिलती।
एटलीस्ट वी शुड ट्राई।
आपकी थोड़ी सी हिम्मत और एक कंप्लेंट की वजह से आपको रैगिंग जैसी बीमारी से छुटकारा मिल सकता है. यूज हेल्पलाइन, इट हेल्प्स.
डॉक्टर नेहा, टीम लंच 9th को है.
सॉरी सर, बट 9 को कहीं और कमिटमेंट है.
सर, नेहा मैम ने एक बार कमिटमेंट कर दी ना, तो वो खुद की भी नहीं सुनती.
कैसी कमिटमेंट? कमिटमेंट प्रेग्नेंट विमेन के लिए. प्रधानमंत्री सुरक्षित मातृत्व अभियान ज्वाइन किया है मैंने. सरकारी अस्पताल जाकर स्पेशल एएनसी सर्विस मुफ्त देती हूँ. आखिर हम प्राइवेट डॉक्टर्स का भी तो कुछ फर्ज बनता है.
लंच कैंसिल. आई प्लेज फॉर 9.
हर 9 तारीख को होने वाली माँ का ख्याल सबसे पहले.
Welcome back. You're watching India First, and we're talking about the change of guard in Pakistan's army and whether it will affect relations with India or not. Let's continue this discussion. Ambassador Parthasarthy, before we went into that break, we were talking about how US has also welcomed this move. They've congratulated the new chief, but again, they have said, expressed that hope that the country would never allow the use of its soil for terrorism against its neighbors, something that the United States has been saying time and again. Looking at this whole dynamics and this new chief now taking over, so then dynamics with the Western nations, do they also kind of remain the same, or can we expect a change there as well?
Let me say this, that people I've spoken to in Washington and elsewhere, they found Raheel Sharif to be overbearing.
Okay.
I mean, the army chief does have a role, but he wields power quietly. Raheel Sharif even insulted the Iranian president and earned the wrath of. So he was up front. He was crude. I think that form of army involvement will be more carefully modulated. The other thing is that Raheel's choice was Zubair Hayat. Zubair Hayat. All these people were commissioned in 1980 in the same batch, and the present Army Chief Bajwa was fifth or so in the list of lieutenant generals. The man one was Zubair Hayat, and Zubair Hayat is therefore being moved to the highest position in the armed forces.
True, you're talking about the post of the chairman, Joint Chief of Staff Committee, but how really important is that as a post in the army, within the army hierarchy?
In the case of Zubair Hayat, it is important.
Okay.
Because he is for a very long time the Pakistan nuclear command, controlling the nuclear weapons, was headed by a general called Khalid Kidwai, many years, and by all accounts he did a brilliant job. He has now been succeeded by Zubair Hayat. I mean, he was earlier succeeded in that post by Zubair Hayat as Lieutenant General, but the head of the nuclear command reports to not to the army chief, to the chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Okay.
Because for nuclear weapons, you use the Air Force, you use missiles. They don't have a naval deterrent, but certainly the Air Force and the missile force. So he controls that, and he reports to the nuclear command authority headed by the Prime Minister. So that is an important post, and what Sharif has done is, what Nawaz Sharif has done is that Zubair Hayat, as has been mentioned, was really Raheel Sharif's man.
Okay.
And by kicking him upstairs, he's deprived him charge of the chief of the army, who wields the real power within the country.
So, Mr. Sareen, then how do these dynamics really play out when we're talking about Nawaz Sharif, the Prime Minister, really not getting Raheel Sharif's man to wield power as the chief of the army, but then having that post which is really controlling the nuclear weapons? How do these dynamics really play out when it comes within the Pakistan establishment, and then what it means for its neighbors?
Yeah, that's the paradox. The Prime Minister appoints his boss. No, the Prime Minister actually ends up appointing his own boss.
Okay.
So what Nawaz Sharif has actually done is he's appointed his own boss in General Bajwa. The Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff is largely a ceremonial post. Of course, given the background which Ambassador Parthasarthy has given about Zubair Hayat having served in the SPD and now as Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff, he will be, the SPD chief would be reporting to him. But I think the linchpin would remain the army chief. That's a no-brainer, because whoever is the Lieutenant General, even though he's reporting to the Chairman Joint Chiefs, ultimately the promotions and the postings are in the hands of the Army Chief, not the Chairman Joint Chiefs. So he would be the main guy. But purely in the civil-military domain, what happens is that whatever the calculations, whatever the reasons why you pick up a certain guy over the other people, the institution and the ethos of the institution tends to take over after some time. And it is inconceivable for an army chief to actually go against what is the sentiment within the army in reaching out to the political leadership. So that friction is built into the system. Regardless of who you pick and whatever reasons or whatever attributes you look into a guy before you pick him up for that position, the bottom line is that once he becomes chief, he is his own master. He is not going to be looking for instructions or directions towards the Prime Minister. Perhaps for a short bit of time, but not for any length of time. He will follow his own course. The only thing which can be said about General Bajwa, at least that's the grapevine, we'll see how it plays out, is that he's a lot more relaxed sort of a guy.
More professional, so to say?
No, see, look, anybody who rises up to the rank of a Lieutenant General, you assume he's a professional soldier. That is one of the big stupidities in the Pakistani public discourse, that somebody is a very professional soldier. Of course he's a professional soldier. That's why he's become a Lieutenant General, If he wasn't a professional soldier, he would be selling pakoras somewhere. So he is a professional soldier, they all are. That is not... But they create this kind of a thing that
discourse
again.
Around it.
And the moment the guy becomes the chief, then all the best attributes of the world are associated with him. I saw a lot of this boot polishing happening, in the last 2 days, where senior retired army officers saying that he was probably God's gift to Pakistan. Stuff like that. Had he not been picked, he would have been said that he had already been sidelined. So that kind of bullshit happens all the time in the Pakistani media. But the point is that as far as the dynamic between the civil and military is concerned, I think it will depend on the personality of General Bajwa, but only at the margins.
Okay.
It will only be at the margins that he'll be able to do something. To expect that there will be some kind of a major paradigm change in the orientation of the army in his 3-year tenure, that's not going to happen. And what is also important is to understand that when he takes over power, when he starts exercising the power, I think because of the fact that he's an easygoing sort of a guy, he does not have the normal contempt which most Pakistani military officers have towards the civilians. Perhaps there might be a better working relationship between him and the civilians.
So
authority.
wouldn't a more realistic expectation from India also would be maybe he's not as hostile as Rahil Sharif, looking at what Rahil Sharif's background was, looking at the kind of lows there are in India-Pak relationships. I mean, could we only go up from here?
At best at a tactical level.
True.
Only on a tactical level. There will not be a strategic paradigm shift in Pakistan army saying, okay, we want normal relations with India. We are not going to sponsor terrorism in India. We are, we are going to give up all these terrorist proxies that we have spawned for so long. I don't see that happen.
Ambassador Parthasarthy, last comments from you also. Do you agree with what Mr. Sareen
I
said?
absolutely agree with Sushant. I knew his father and he's done his father proud because, the army as an institution is not going to change. The army's as an institution is built on hate of India. Now, what Bajwa may do is perhaps not use the sort of crude terminology which was used by Rahil Sharif. Rahil Sharif was a particularly crude human being, if you can call him a human being. But that won't be there. Perhaps it will be more civilized conversation. So, if he meets his Indian counterpart, they could have a chat. But if one thinks that all this is going to end, or that more Khalistanis getting out of jails, they are not going to get involved in, I think forget it. That is going to continue. But again, everything depends on their perception of us. They believe that Mr. Modi is totally different from any Indian ruler they have dealt with, and that of all political parties, and therefore there is a certain apprehension.
Okay.
There is a certain unpredictability they believe about Mr. Modi, and as long as he is seen as being unpredictable in their eyes, it's good for us.
Okay, on that note, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us here on India First, putting things into perspective for us, sharing your insights as well on the change of guard in Pakistan's new army. So with that, we come to the end of the show today. But news and updates continue here on DD News, so you stay tuned. Namaskar.
Thank you.